Good morning. It's funny, songs matched well together. Drew looked at Hebrews 11 this morning. We're going to look at Hebrews 12 this morning as well. So it's funny to see how all those things connect. And we got a good amount of visitors. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you to everyone checking and praying on for Hannah. We really appreciate it. She's just got this really bad respiratory virus thing, so her lungs are really struggling right now, but she's on some medicine now, so keep her in your prayers. We'd appreciate that. Well, before we jump into today's topic, we're going to talk about endurance, and we're going to look at chapter 12 of Hebrews to focus in on that. I'm going to tell a quick story. In 1929, there was a Rose Bowl, a college football bowl, and it was the California Golden Bears versus the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. I don't think they have those same mascot names anymore. Well, near the end of the first half, Georgia Tech fumbled the ball, and Roy Riegels, California's center, picked up the ball. Good news, but he started running the wrong way. This is kind of a fun, famous story. But despite his teammates shouting and chasing him, Roy ran nearly 65 yards the wrong way, so he was making some distance. Eventually, his teammate Benny Lum tackled him near the goal line to prevent a safety. Despite an attempted punt, it resulted in a safety anyway in the following play. In the locker room, at halftime, Riegels was devastated, as you can imagine. This is a bowl game. This is terrifyingly embarrassing, just worst case scenario. His coach, Nibs Price, reportedly said nothing for the first few minutes until finally he broke the silence and announced the second half lineup. To everyone's surprise, Riegels was on that lineup for the second half. Riegels responded to the coach. He said, "Coach, I can't do it. I've ruined you. I've ruined myself. I've ruined the University of California. I couldn't face that crowd to save my life." The coach replied, "Roy, get up and go back out there. The game is only half over." And they lost 8-7. They lost 8-7, yet no one knows any members of the winning team. No one knows of any plays, but everyone knows that story because there's something true. And even despite the loss, there's something more impressive about that day and more impactful on Roy Riegels and on all who hear about this story. And that is this idea of endurance. And that is simply not giving up. That you're not giving up and you're holding fast. And when you think about it, why do we give up on things? You know, maybe you used to go to the gym. Maybe it was a diet. Maybe it was a book you're reading. Why do we give up on things? I forgot to show the picture as I told that story. Oops, there you go. There's Roy Riegels right there. But why do we give up on things? I think there's a few reasons. Maybe we feel like we're a failure at it. Like, man, I stink at this. I'm not doing it anymore. Or maybe you just don't see the benefit to doing it like you used to. Maybe at one point you saw the gym as it's worth it. I'm getting this muscle. I'm getting healthier. But then all of a sudden you're like, but Cheetos sound a lot better. You know, it's not worth the sacrifice. So I think sometimes this applies to our Christian walk simply by the virtue of, have you ever felt like you're a failure at being a Christian? I mean, just honestly, have you ever felt like, I'm really bad at this? I don't know. I have. Have you ever felt like life would be easier if you just gave up following Christ? Maybe your life's become more difficult, or relationships have become more difficult to navigate, or there are things that you have to turn away from, and you just want to go back to how it used to be before Christ. I think there are multiple reasons for why we give up on things. And I think it's important to know that we aren't alone in feeling that. In fact, that's what Hebrews is all about. Spoiler alert. Hebrews is all about endurance. The whole book is about endurance because of what Christ has done on the cross for you and I. And so the overall message in Hebrews is don't go back. Don't go back. Don't be like Israel grumbling in the wilderness to go back to Egypt. Stay firm. Stay strongly committed in your loyal devotion to the Lord. So let's look at chapter 12, verse 1. Now, again, what does chapter 12 follow? Chapter 11. Very good. All right, so that's the context for this. It says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. All right, so there's that first. I want to focus in on that. So great a cloud of witnesses. What's going on here? Well, I believe that it's obviously in reference to all those faithful mentioned in chapter 11, but I believe it goes it means so much more than just spectators. The word spectator isn't used here, like just cheering on like you're in a stadium or something. They're all in the bleachers cheering for you. The idea is witnesses. They're making a testimony about God and his trustworthiness. But notice this cloud language, this cloud of witnesses. We can see this same language throughout the Old Testament. In Psalm 89, verse 5, it says, "Let the heavens praise your wonders, O Lord, your faithfulness, and the assembly of the holy ones." This is a heavenly council scene. "For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord? A God greatly to be feared in the council of the holy ones, and awesome above all who are around him." We see God's just absolutely over all spiritual beings, right? And so we see that there's physical family, there's a spiritual family. And look at Hebrews 2:11. Notice how it went from simply angelic beings being in the skies with God. Look at verse 11 of chapter 2. "For he who sanctifies and those who are sanctified all have one source. That is why he, Jesus, is not ashamed to call them brothers." That's you and I. "Saying, I will tell of your name to my brothers. In the midst of the congregation, I will sing your praise." This is that heavenly courtroom scene. And look at chapter 12. That later on, we're going to see, "But you have come to Mount Zion, and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels and festal gathering, and to the assembly," that's ecclesia, the same word we use for church, "and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect." This is so significant. It tells us that Christ's one-time offering has made perfect atonement for all who put their faith in Christ, and because of Christ's offering, we are now members of God's courtroom with angelic beings. Something that was once reserved for spiritual beings, now guess what? Human beings who have put their faith in Christ are in God's presence. This cloud of witnesses made up of humans and angels. I think that is just a beautiful picture to see the atoning work. It talks about the holy place and the most holy place in Hebrews, and the whole point is that Christ tore that barrier down and brings his brothers into that area, into God's presence. So let's look at another idea here. He says, and let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. I've talked about this before, but I have a point of contention with the way this is translated. It's we kind of see this generic, like, we all have sin that we struggle with. We all have like unique temptations or not so unique temptations, and it besets us, and it's going to be kind of a whole life thing of battling with that temptation and success and failure. And so we kind of read this and look at a grocery list like, okay, here's all these sins, lay aside that. That's not the idea that's being communicated here. It's not, since we have so many witnesses of God's trustworthiness, get your moral act together, though we should. There's two reasons why I think this is not the case. Number one, there's a definite article here in the Greek, ten, and it means the. So what he says is literally, and let us lay aside the sin which clings so closely. In effect, it's basically like saying, if I tell you, give me a sandwich, is there any specific type of sandwich? Can you bring me anything and you accomplish what I said? Give me a sandwich. Yeah, bologna, pastrami, doesn't matter. You give me a sandwich. If I say, give me the sandwich, what am I indicating? There's a specific singular sandwich that I want. There's a specific sin that the Hebrew author refers to all throughout this letter. When he says sin, almost every time he says the sin, the sin. And if you think about this consistently with chapter 11 in context, think about everyone who's listed in that cloud of witnesses. Were they all bastions of perfect morality? No. Who's in there? Noah, right? Noah, man of faith. He got so hammered, he was in his birthday suit in front of his family outside his tent. We got David in there, murderer, committed adulterer. Jacob, was he like the super stand-up, trustworthy guy that everything he said was truth and upright? Absolutely not. It's full of moral failures, but it's also filled with faithful figures who did not forsake their commitment to God. They never cease to strive after God despite their failures. And so what we see, it's the same with Saul and David. Saul had a lot of moral failings. David had a lot of moral failings. But David constantly pursued God. Remember, Saul stopped pursuing God. They were not better on a moral, this one acted better, this one didn't act better. It's like, no, both their behaviors were pretty reprehensible. Yet one continued to follow after God's heart. That's what we see here. So when he says the sin, he's talking about the sin of apostasy. And we see that all throughout this letter. Look at verse 12 of Hebrews chapter 3. It says, "Take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God." In verse 14, he says, "For we have come to share in Christ, if indeed we" what? "We hold our original confidence firm to the end." In other words, that we do not give up. Endurance is equating to holding fast. Not pulling yourself up by your moral bootstraps. It's by holding fast to your commitment to God. But how do we lay aside the sin? Look at verse 2. It says, "Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God." We don't look to our own moral batting average. We look to Christ, the founder and what? The perfecter of our faith. He endured so much persecution, yet he never wavered. It's because of his endurance that we can endure. You see that? It's not by virtue of ourselves. It's by Christ's endurance that we can have the strength to endure. And I believe that this chapter in the past has been used to bludgeon people into hopelessness by tying salvation to performance. Now, we have to understand good works are important. They are essential, but they flow out of gratitude and thankfulness. They're a part of sanctification, not salvation. And we can't confuse the two. Christ's blood, I heard this example. I think it's a really apt description. Christ's blood is not a coupon. We don't walk up to the salvation store and say, "Hey, I got this many good works, and I know I'm lacking, so here's Jesus' blood as atonement, and that makes up for the rest." No, it's all Jesus' blood. That's all. That's the price for salvation. I think that's important for us to know. Look at what Paul says in Galatians 3, verses 2 and 3. He says, "Let me ask you only this. Did you receive the Spirit? Did you begin your walk with Christ? Did you begin salvation by works of the law, by our own good deeds, or by hearing with faith? Are you so foolish? Having begun by the Spirit, are you now being perfected by the flesh?" Did we begin our Christian walk by works? No, it's by faith. And guess what? We don't finish our Christian walk by works. It's again by faith, as long as we hold fast. And again, this isn't to underemphasize good works or moral living. That's essential for a Christian. But that's sanctification, not salvation. Look at verse 14 of chapter 10. "For by a single offering he has perfected for all time those who are being sanctified." See, sanctification is a process. We're going to ebb and flow, hopefully do more growing than failing. But salvifically, how are we determined? We've been perfected by Christ's offering. Look at verses 3 through 4. "Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. In your struggle against the sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood." Now, no one's shedding their blood like I'm really mad that you won't commit adultery, so I'm going to stab you, right? Like, that's not what's going on here. But in context, what we know is these Hebrews, they were undergoing persecution for being Christians. They were being jailed. They were being literally martyred. So you can see if they're Jewish, they can say, "Hey, I can just let go of the Christ part, hold fast to the law and to God, and then I don't have to go through persecution. I can be accepted in society." So the Hebrew author is saying, look, your works won't save you. The law can't save you. Jesus made the perfect sacrifice for all time. So don't give up the only means by which we can attain eternal salvation. If you neglect Christ, then you're relying on you. If you rely on you, you're not going to get in because you're imperfect. It depends. It all hinges on Christ and his crucifixion and his perfect atonement. Look at verses 5 through 11. It says, "And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and chastises every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time, as it seemed best to them. But he disciplines us for our good, that we may share his holiness. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. So discipline, the word, it can mean education, teaching, not exclusively punishment. So parents, have you ever let your kids go through something like unpleasant or that they didn't want to do for sake of teaching them a lesson? Right? Maybe you make them eat their vegetables, even though they despise the experience. Yeah, why do you make them eat their vegetables? Because it's good for them. Maybe it's school, maybe it's a sport, whatever it is, we understand the point. Not all discipline is retribution, right? Some of it is just, that's the way it is, and I'm trying to get you to learn a lesson through it. And it's ironic because often at times when we feel God has left us alone, that's precisely the point at which God is most present in our lives. He's training us. He is teaching us. It's in these seasons of trial when we have to endure the most, because it's in those seasons when we are at the most in danger of the sin of giving up, of not holding fast. When you think about Israel in the wilderness, that the Hebrew author pulls from so much, when did the people of Israel grumble? It's when they were hungry, when they were thirsty, when they were scared, when they felt like God had left them alone. That's when they said, hey, guess what? I want to go back to Egypt. I want to go back to slavery. And when we feel like God isn't giving us what we need, or we feel like we're tired, or we're hungry, or we're thirsty, God's not in our lives, is the Lord among us or not, as Israel said, that's when we're the most in danger of committing the sin, of falling from God, of not holding fast our commitment to Christ. Look at verses 12 through 17. Therefore, lift your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees, and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. Strive for peace with everyone, and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. That no one is sexually immoral or unholy like Esau, who sold his birthright for a single meal. For you know that afterward, when he desired to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no chance to repent, though he sought it with tears. So I want to focus our attention firstly to this, that may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. All right, who's that in reference to? Remember Jacob? He wrestles with God. That's crazy. He wrestles with God. He says, give me a blessing. Give me a blessing. And what is God, the angel of the Lord, what does he do? He touches him in his hip, and it's like breaks the sinew. Like it's something terrible injury happens to him. And guess what? Jacob doesn't let go. He has a broken hip, and he's still wrestling with him. It's like, what are you doing? You're not going to win. So this is a clear reference to Jacob. When you think about it, he wrestled with God. He was injured by God. He endured in his striving for a blessing, and he was blessed by God, but he also walked with a limp the rest of his life. You see what I'm saying here? You see what the Hebrew author is saying here? It's hard to kick against the goats, right? As God tells Saul, like, hey, it's really tough. Now, there are different ways to endure. There are different ways. I know of people who have died in the faith kind of kicking and screaming. It's kind of like a struggle their whole life. And sometimes they'd fall into bitterness, then they'd get they'd be like, okay, I'm being unreasonable. I need to show more faith. I need to have faith in God. And it's just suffering can taint them. They can have a season of just kind of sliding back and then being committed again. And I've known people who have just, regardless of whatever horrendous circumstances, they have stayed faithful to God. Now, I believe both are saved. As long as they've been faithful to God. But there's one way that doesn't leave you with a broken hip. And so he's saying, look, you can endure, But don't be like Jacob where you fight so hard. Israel, his name was changed to Israel. Israel means he who wrestles with God. All right, and that's what God's people are still called today. We're still called the true Israel, according to Paul. So it's those who wrestle with God. That's part of our identity because we're not going to understand everything. We're finite. We're going to have doubts. We're going to have things that we wrestle through, but ultimately we put our faith in God. But don't fight to the point where you break something because God's smarter than you. He's stronger than you. So unlike Jacob, sometimes let it go. Right? Sometimes you just need to let it go and say, I'm not going to try to force my way on God. I'm going to say, thy will be done. Second thought, he says, and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. Which holiness? Look back at verse 10. But he disciplines us for our good that we may share in his holiness. This is the Lord's holiness, that he is growing within us. And another thought, see to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God. Does that sound like weird language? Obtain grace. What's the definition of grace? Unmerited, right? You don't obtain it. And funnily enough, the word obtain is not in the Greek. There's another point of contention where you're just like, why'd you do this? The word is not obtain. The word is hysteron, and it means falls short or fails. In other words, see to it that no one forsakes God's grace or turns away from God's grace. That makes much more sense in the context anyway. And notice he also says root of bitterness, that no root of bitterness. Using our moral batting average to discern how God feels about us. It's kind of like playing he loves me not. It's a terrible idea. Or suffering can create bitterness that drives us back to Egypt. We feel like we're constantly failures, so I might as well give up now. Or I'm constantly suffering, so God must not be with me, so I'm going to forsake him. That's why the Hebrew author says we look to Christ and how he endured, not ourselves or our circumstances, not our moral performance, not our physical circumstances, to determine how God feels about us. And notice that he says that, see to it that no one is sexually immoral or unholy like Esau. Think about this. Esau gave up his inheritance to satisfy momentary hunger, right? That inheritance would have blessed him and his generations throughout all time. Yet he gave it up for one meal because he was hungry. This is about Esau's view of his inheritance in contrast to Jacob. Because what is Jacob? Jacob values that inheritance. Esau does not value that inheritance. The Hebrew author is saying, don't give up the inheritance that Christ suffered to give us to satisfy worldly desires. Don't forsake Christ to pursue momentary pleasure. It's not about a temporary failure. It's about what we value most. Do we value the inheritance that Christ offers us freely through his sacrifice, or do we value temporary things more, that we turn our back on God? Look at verses 18 through 21. For you have not come to what may be touched, a blazing fire, and darkness, and gloom, and a tempest, and the sound of a trumpet, and a voice whose words made the hearers beg that no further messages be spoken to them. For they could not endure the order that was given. If even a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I tremble with fear. So this is an obvious reference to Mount Sinai. And what was Sinai all about? The law. What's the only way to be justified by the law? Moral perfection. And that's the problem. Everyone failed at it. And think about it. We often think how cool would it be to be in God's presence and everything else. So when we look at Sinai, the Hebrew author is painting this is really a terrifying and terrible experience. Imagine you have a leader, right? Your own leader who communes with God. He's like, I'm scared to death, guys. And you're like, what? You're the guy, though. What do you mean you're scared? A beast will die if it touches the mountain. It's all about this distance. And Paul talks about in Galatians 3:19 about angels being there to deliver this law. So there's this clear separation. God's on his mountain. There's his spiritual beings all there, and he descends down and gives these laws, and then Moses takes it down to the people, and the people have to stay way far back. Do you see this? This is a very, very good metaphor. But God is so terrifying. The people are like, no more. Please, tell God to stop talking. Like that. Think about it. It wasn't like some awesome spiritual high. This was a terrible thing. They wanted it to be over. Now look at how he contrasts this. In verse 22, but you have come to, that's the perfect tense. In other words, you've arrived and are arriving. So it's already a not yet idea here. Mount Zion, and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous, what? Made perfect. That's passive in the Greek. It's not something they did, it's something that was done, hint, through Christ. And to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. Now, this is so fascinating because think about the terrifying picture that's painted, right, at Mount Sinai. And then if you look at this picture here, that what we have in Christ, where do we see? The angels. Are they just giving a law or are they celebrating? They're celebrating. And guess who the angels are celebrating with? Human beings. And who are humans and angels in the presence of? God the Father and the Son. Think about this reversal. Sinai is all this about the separation. Don't touch the mountain, right? Angels up here, God's up there even higher, and then Moses is here and the people are down here. And yet here, everyone is together. A giant cosmic family in the presence of the Father of all spirits. And it's such a beautiful picture because we have that confidence. We have that ability to enter into God's presence because of the offering that Christ made. That's his blood that speaks a better word than Abel. What does that mean? What does Abel's blood do? Remember when Cain kills Abel, God says, your brother's blood has cried to me from the ground. You know what's a cry for? For justice. Abel's blood was a cry for justice to God to deal justly with his brother who killed him. And yet, what does Jesus' blood do? Does it condemn or call for justice? Christ's blood calls for God's mercy and his grace. It commends us, not condemns us. And it's just a beautiful picture of we endure, not because we've got it all together, we're super strong. We endure because Christ did it. Because Christ endured. And salvation is the freest gift of all. It's the last thing in the world that should be made into a millstone around our neck. So the Hebrew author is saying, think about the inheritance. Think about this picture. You're here right now. And you're going to be. And you're going to continue to be so. And even more in the future. That's the reality. That's your inheritance that Christ has brought you here. So don't give it up. Yeah, life might stink right now. That could be a reality for you. Don't give up. You may feel like an absolute failure. Well, yeah, you're a failure. I'm a failure too. We're all kind of failures. That's kind of the point. Look at the final verses here, 25 through 29. See to it that you do not refuse him who is speaking. For if they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, much less will we escape if we reject him who warns from heaven. At that time his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, yet once more, and I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. This phrase, yet once more, indicates the removal of things that are shaken. That is, things that have been made, in order that the things that cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. And thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. He's going to consume anything that isn't pure, right? Burns everything off that doesn't look like Jesus. And what remains is what Christ has done for us on the cross. This is the reality. Don't give up your loyalty to God to pursue pleasure or to escape suffering. You know, you ever heard of the marshmallow experiment? It's really interesting. They got these really little kids, and they put a marshmallow in front of them, and they said, all right, we're going to leave for a few minutes. If you don't eat that marshmallow, I'll come back with 2 marshmallows. And so some kids, as you can imagine, just ate the marshmallow, didn't get more. Other kids who were promised, they were like, okay, they kept their marshmallow there, and then they got more marshmallows, right? So it was basically a study on impulse and, thinking long-term. And they did a longitudinal study with this. They followed those kids' lives, and the ones that waited for the second marshmallow had significantly better lives, better relationships. Really interesting, right? Don't be like the first marshmallow kids when it comes to faith. Don't be like, no, I'm giving up everything. I'm giving up this eternal peace with God. I'm giving up presence with God to pursue this meal, right? This red stuff, as Esau would say. Don't give up. We're already there, and we're getting there. And we talked about, he said that heavenly Jerusalem, that we've arrived and are arriving. We see this heavenly Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God, and God says, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. It's a beautiful picture and a beautiful promise. So in other words, if you're tired, bitter, ashamed, I think Christ would tell us the same thing that Coach Ned said. Get up, get back out there. The game is only half over. So don't give up, don't lose heart. And if you haven't begun your journey, you're missing out. You're missing out on the inheritance, on eternal peace, on the peace of knowing that Christ has done that for you if you put your faith in him and that you crucify yourself in baptism. By the way, baptism language and washing language, it's passive in the Greek. Meaning it's not something you're doing to yourself, it's something God is doing to you in baptism. So if you want to begin that journey, we ask that you do so as we stand and sing.